Okay. So, Renee, I was thinking about as I thought about our session together,
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about how grateful I am that you and I connected. And life is so funny the way the journey sort of creates. Yeah, I really believe that we're all pulled by each other's energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly have been so energy sensitive since I was a very small child. One day I'll share some energy sensitive stories with you.
Please.
But
Thank you.
anyway, I was thinking about this when did I become keenly aware of the racial injustice as I tried to develop my consciousness about life in general, which I've had to work very hard to do. And I chose to work very hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I was a second year college student. I read the book Black Like Me. Have you ever read that?
I did. I've even lived
That,
it.
oh, that's it. That sounds like a really interesting story. But for people who have never read Black Like Me, it is the most amazing true story of a white man who changes the pigment living in the South. Think about this, with a wife and 3 children, but feels compelled to understand what it was like to walk in a Black man's shoes. And he felt the only way he could really understand was to actually work with a dermatologist to change the pigment of his skin. And when you read that book, which I hope everybody will, and I was thrilled, by the way, when I learned from Cheryl Root, one of our board members and a professor at Cal, I'm blanking on the university, the best tech university in the country. Please, someone give me a name. But anyway, it will come. I'm blanking.
Carnegie Mellon.
Carnegie Mellon, thank you so much. So at Carnegie Mellon, they created a required reading list for all faculty. And I asked her if she would add that book because it was so powerful. And that's when I first began starting to really feel I was so angry about it from a very young age because it just triggered something in me that, and it still does, that makes me crazy because I feel I can't control it, but I can certainly contribute to solutions. Go ahead, Renee.
Well, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with Carolyn Layton and the Women in Technology International. Couple of things. Want to be able to take, how much time do we have, Carolyn? Do we have an hour?
We have an hour or less.
Okay, okay. So be able to take this time.
30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay, was what we did say. We have this time, we want to be able to share with you, at least from my perspective, and Carolyn, we've talked, want to be able to share with you kind of our perspectives on some of this critical issue around addressing structural and systemic racism, a business imperative, and how we bring different perspectives to bear. But what we find in common is the value that we hold for freedom and justice and equity. And each person is a value, a gem, a gift, a blessing. And how we create structures and institutions to recognize that and then to practice. And part of that is the notion of how do we begin to eliminate these systemic practices, institutions around racism. And so, you know, the moment called us to have a conversation and at least be willing to share our conversation. So that's my hope for this afternoon.
Thank you, Renee. I'm always so elated at your amazing gift of eloquence. You have such a gift, and what thrills me is that you use that gift to really make a positive difference in this world, and that's what we're all here for.
For sure. You know, we say the work I do a lot of work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and so we use a diversity principle, right? And that we're all unique and have a unique contribution to make. How do we create a society? How do we create institutions? How do we create teams that allows each person to bring the best of who they are to be in service to mission?
Yes.
Right?
And
right?
we must extend that also, of course, to educators and schools and colleges, because it starts from such an early age.
Yeah, yeah. We'll have another conversation. We can get into one when you said that made me think of another topic I've been dying to talk to somebody about. I've said to my white female friends, since we're talking about race, we're just going to be open and honest here. I said to my white female friends, white supremacy ends when white women end it, because those attitudes begin at home and they get perpetuated in the systems and the structures, right? Yes. And so what happened to get us to this moment? For us to be able to have this conversation. And I may just say, I did not know this was going to be on Facebook. Since this is an honest reaction, and I'm going to talk about transparency and the need for us to be accountable. I'm going to have to temper myself, Carolyn.
Okay, well, whatever you do, as long as it's aligned with your values and what you're trying to do, then I'm totally supportive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So anyways, do you want me to set some of the context for this conversation?
I think that's a good idea. And then I want to tell you a story.
Okay. So, you know, we talked about coming at this moment. It's what we've been calling a confluence of crises, right? We've had the pandemic, right? The human crisis. Everybody got affected by that. It weakened us. It made us raw, right? And then we got to watch on a daily or regular basis, maybe not been daily because it wasn't always videotaped, racial killing, from my perspective, the murder of Black people for doing everyday things repeatedly and repeatedly. And when Mr. Floyd was kneeled to death, and all he could say was, "I can't breathe." That is how raw we were to that emotion. Breath. Carol and I just had the conversation on breath, and it awoken many people in ways that they had not been aware before, because now they can feel it, right? It's not good enough to talk about systemic, right? But what does it feel?
Yes.
Right? And so I think that's part of what has prompted us to have this conversation, you know, addressing systemic racism, a business imperative. Why is it important for businesses to address this? Because it's systems. It's part and parcel of society.
If we don't change the system, then nothing substantial changes.
Right, we got to stop moving it from just individual actions to institutional accountability. Sure, individuals are responsible for their conduct and their behavior. Sure, individuals have an opportunity to change their attitude, right, and their perspective. But institutions, particularly those of societal institutions and those of public sector in particular, right? That's why it's called public. It's not private, but we're going to talk about private. So you ask me a question, I'll answer. I'll ask you a question, you answer.
Okay. What's your question?
Well, I'd like to get a sense of why, you know, you always talk about the values of diversity, the values of equity, the values of justice. Why is that important for businesses? Oh,
it's so critical in every way, because, well, let's talk about innovation. If companies do not lead in innovation, they risk becoming obsolete. And I say that for every business, no matter how small or big. And one of the things that really inspired me, and when I started Witty and structured Witty, is I was doing a lot of work for Hewlett Packard Labs. I loved going there because, unlike some of the places I visited, you had some people who were so dedicated to working with each other. And when they decided to start a product or develop a product, before they made a final decision, they brought together a group of very diverse people. And I had never seen that in any company before. They brought a teacher, a physicist, a scientist, Black people, white people, women, and people from different countries. So as my mentor there said, we want to look through everybody's eyes, because unless we do that, we will never find the best solution or the best product. So that's the core of all business. Now there's one other piece to it. Because the best women in technology and the best employees, as we see from many companies where employees are walking out because of a lack of alignment of values, that unless you create an environment where every human being, whether he's a janitor or a president or white or Black, whatever he or she is really valued equally and respected, then you'll always have a toxic environment. And nobody benefits from toxic environments. So go ahead, Renee.
Yeah. You know, I think part of this becomes the notion around how do we use this moment with this awareness to begin to transform organizations, right? What is it that they can do within their span of control as an institution to address systemic racism? So, you know, in some of the work we do, we always say, first and foremost, you have to acknowledge it and you have to do an assessment, right? There's strategies.
Well, and you must make sure for it to be effective that the executive team leading the company is 100% committed to that outcome, to the stated outcome, because we know that for some companies, it's just an initiative there to appease people. It's not serious, but it's never serious if it doesn't come from the top.
And it also has to be tied to budgets, right? Budgets, in terms of the talent, the time, and the treasures. You know, and so one of the things we're seeing happening right now is many corporations and institutions are making statements about their commitment to racial justice and racial equity, their willingness to look at systemic prejudice. The question, and then they're now putting some money behind it by moving dollars into community organizations and other initiatives. My question becomes, is that an action for the moment, just kind of a reactive, or what will we look at for sustainability? How do we measure how these investments, stated investments, are being made, and what are the metrics? How do we ask individuals within their organization to ask their company if they made a statement? What does this mean in terms of what we do every day and what's going to change? And here's some things I could suggest.
Well, and that is precisely why I am so delighted that we're working together on a project to bring up to date the glass ceiling report, the commission of which you headed, with such outstanding in the 90s recommendations for all of the things you're saying. And my goal is to have a package that incorporates those pieces, because if we leave it to companies, it's not going to happen. If we want to be a leader, then we have to make it happen.
Yeah, we have to insist that people practice what they're actually committing to.
Yes.
Right, that's the accountability.
Because there are so many
statements, you know, whose ever organization has made a statement, now you need to put some metrics to it. What does this then mean for us?
I have an idea which I would like to incorporate as part of the program we're updating. I don't know if you had a chance to see it on the news as I did last night, but did you see what happened with NASCAR? Well,
tell me what happened.
Well, evidently, one of Bubba's team members found a noose hanging in their garage, their work garage. And what I saw last night gave me hope and it made me cry. And it was, they showed every one of the competitive drivers forming a unit, marching behind Bubba while he drove his car, to push him to first place.
Wow.
So I was so deeply touched by what I was feeling and seeing. It was wonderful. So I thought, what if Witty, creates a circle of support so that every time, as part of, you say it's got to be reflected in action, just picture being in a meeting with 10 people, 100 people, and every time someone is spoken to without respect, demeaned, innuendos that are totally inappropriate, everyone gets up. I mean, I pictured the whole thing in my mind. Everyone gets up, and instead of rebuking by word the person who did it, everyone's going to form a circle around the person they were targeting. So that he or she feels so supported, because when I saw that NASCAR, that's all I could think of. We have got to make that happen through Witty. Are you on board?
Of course.
I mean, is that powerful? Do you agree?
It is powerful. And, you know, how do we support positive? Okay, this is what we're asking people to do. Look at your institution. If they have made a statement, you now have something that they are public with, right? Yeah. That's a mechanism for accountability. How do we offer support in what we do within the institution, within our span of control and our sphere of influence, right? What can we do within the organization to make that statement real? That's how we can begin to demonstrate support for one another and for moving this agenda forward. You know, everyone has responsibility, you know, at all levels of the organization has responsibility for creating the culture, the workplace, the practices, the removal of the systemic barriers to equity and justice. Everyone has an opportunity for that.
But let's talk about the individual options, because if I'm working for an institution that has no interest in changing, what do I do as I am going to work every day? What is the most positive thing I can do with that situation? Do I stay and try to change it? Do I leave for a company that is aligned? What do I do?
I think you have choices. I think it's a situation specific. I think you have to give voice. People have to get clear. You know, do you stand? Values are something you either stand for them, or you either know what you stand for or what you don't stand for, right? Yeah. And so people have to make those decisions. You know, Carol, I was just looking at some of the questions that popped up in the Q&A. So what are good motivators to move leaders to become transformative? Holding them accountable. Holding them accountable. Their word is their bond. If they say it, hold them accountable. Yeah. Trust, confidence born out of character and competence.
And I would add, not only start the conversation, but sustain the conversation. Not just with the person you're going to hold accountable, but having a discussion inside your company, as I assume some of this guy just left Google. I was so impressed, or was it Facebook? But I was so impressed that he left his job as software engineer, young, because he realized he could not work for a company that was not aligned with his principles. It was beautiful. Go ahead, Renee.
Let's see. Is there a website that looks at the core values of a business? You should be able to go to a good business website that has the values. You know, what you stand for, what don't you stand for? So it should be upfront and present. Right? Again, that should be whatever company you're looking at, you ought to be able to see their values. You know, what are they? And then be able to compare it with practice.
And also, if your own company does not have a list of values, you're welcome to go to witty.com and look at our code of ethics, because maybe you want to start making a stand and making everyone make a stand for what's important.
And give them a template.
Be a leader. Yes.
Where you look at diversity, do we look at human race or via education? Everything, all of the above. Diversity, we're all unique and have a unique contribution to make. We have multicultural selves, right? So I don't bring just an education or lack thereof. I don't just bring, my gender, my race, my physical expression, my identity. I bring a region, a country, a nation, experience, intellect. So you look everywhere. Identify what your need is within your organization and how do you get better, is one important way in which you can do that. Do you look at human race right now? Okay, how can you encourage white leaders to share their power and network with Black people? How do you approach the conversation? I'm going to smile to start with. How can you encourage white leaders to share their power and network with Black people? If they're not already sharing it, then are they really leading? Let me just ask that question. Carolyn, you're white. I don't want to, let me let Carolyn, you.
Hey, I want to answer that one. So what we felt from the beginning when we started was the only way we could get leaders who have not taken a step in the right direction on board was to make the business case. We made it clear from the beginning, we did not want you to hire us because we're women. And certainly Black people don't want to be hired because they're Black. They want to be hired for the value. So do women. So, and then it's, I think, each of our responsibility to have the facts and have some data. And there's a lot of data out that hiring a diverse and including a diverse workforce, everyone benefits so much, but also the bottom line benefits from being more profitable.
The question then becomes, what's the follow-up on this? How do you approach the conversation? I think right now, the moment is now. Did your company make a statement about what's going on? And if not, why not? Did anyone ask them to? If they didn't think of it on their own accord, maybe you need to ask, where do we stand on this issue? Everybody else is talking about it. Go to Diversity Inc. Go to The Economist. You can get lists of all the companies now that have been making a statement. So if your company is not on that list, that might be a good place to start. Looks like all the companies that are actually moving forward are on this list, at least for a start. Now they said it, go back to what we said earlier, sustainability. How do you hold them accountable? How do you hold them accountable if you're on the list? And if you're not on the list, you may want to find out why.
Okay, so I would like to add something to what Renee said that I think is extremely important. And that is, before you walk in the door to have that conversation, and again, I don't know if you're talking about this kind of conversation, so if you're not, tell us so we can answer that too. But what I would do if I was going into a situation like that with a company that had made a statement, first of all, I like to visualize. I do a lot of visualization and so I really just go into the zone of visualizing exactly how I want that conversation to look. But the other thing I want to do is I don't want to come from anger. Mm-hmm. I don't want to come from being accusing anyone, because I won't reach my goal that way. What I want to do is approach that person from a business point of view and say, I think it is extremely critical that we not only make a statement about how we feel, but we have a meeting to create a plan, because this company won't survive unless they have diverse and inclusive policies. And I'm more than happy to work with you on that.
Mm-hmm. And practices. Because too many of them have policies, right? How were they practicing it? That becomes part of the question. That's the aligning, right? Intent and integrity, right? Aligning that. We have another question. This is such an amazing session. Thank you. What kinds of steps can a leader take to publicly make themselves accountable? What kind of steps can a leader take to publicly make themselves accountable? Okay. I think own the statement first and foremost. I endorse I statements, utilize I statements. I endorse this statement, and here is our plan for going forward. I don't think these are really long conversations. I mean, a lot of business conversations aren't that long. This is about a commitment. This is about character and competence of an individual to lead.
Yes.
You know, some of this stuff isn't that hard. It's just actually getting to do it. Who's got the will? Who's got the courage, right, to actually stand for what they put out in the press? Yeah. Otherwise, it's just a press statement. And I love press people. They do great jobs. But there's got to be some meaning behind it. Hopefully this time, this is what the accountability is. Let them use the I statement. Let your board identify how are they going to hold the institution accountable for delivering on that statement. And what is the delivery? Identify the metrics. Ask the executives, the leadership can say, measure us by our ability to do this.
And let me say a couple of things in addition to what Renee is saying. One, we would be happy to work with you on this. If you would like to reach out to us, we would be absolutely willing to establish a business relationship around this program. That's one. But two, I think it's critical that before you go into that person that you want to influence, that you work to get some support from key people that he or she would consider, whose opinion the person making the decision would consider important and help sway them. So you do your groundwork. Because if you've got to be very strategic, but it really, you're giving a gift. And I think you should think this way and say this: I am giving a gift to our company to bring this to your attention, and I want you to take it really seriously.
All right. So Carolyn, I think that is, I'm looking at the clock here.